NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.
Hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. A madman hell-bent on revenge and death stormed the offices of the Capital Gazette newspaper in Maryland, killing 5 people, 4 of them journalists and the other a sales assistant. 2 others are recovering from their injuries. But an amazing show of American resilience, a show of strength and perseverance, the Capital Gazette managed to publish its newspaper today. The headline simply puts it bluntly: 5 shot dead at the Capitol. It is an amazing feat that this tiny community newspaper managed to still cover the news, a tribute really to the victims and their families, people we are all now sending our prayers towards. But when I see this, when I see the speechless blank sheet of the opinion page, I want to say thank you to the staff at the Capitol. Their resilience during a time of unfathomable grief and even despair proves to me what American exceptionalism really is, and it is on display at the Capital Gazette in Annapolis. NRATV crews were in Annapolis not long after the shooting as police cleared the building and locked down the crime scene. But now you know the shooter had sued the paper for defamation in a 2012 case and had that case thrown out. I will not utter this animal's name. I don't even want to show his picture. He's a deadly menace who proved his lunacy a long time ago. The stark and harsh reality is all of this could have been a lot worse. Police clearly saved lives by responding within 90 seconds of the shooting. 90 seconds. That, for some, 5 people, was a lifetime. 90 seconds, though, was lifetime saved for countless others. There are so many reasons why the shooter should have never been able to pull off a targeted attack on a group of people he repeatedly threatened. Like far too many buildings and offices in America, it wasn't hardened. There was no security or good guys with guns inside. Plus, as in every mass shooting, once again, there were more warning signs, numerous threats, one as early as yesterday morning. The paper's former editor and publisher spoke to the Baltimore Sun from his retirement home in Florida. Thomas Marquardt isn't surprised. The man behind the attack is who he is. The shooter named Marquardt in the shooter's suit in 2012. He says he warned police about the man, and he said this to the Baltimore Sun: "I remember telling our attorneys, this is a guy who is going to come in and shoot us." So how did it get to this some 5-6 years later? The shooter was methodical. He even tore up the tips of his fingers so police couldn't identify him. Several organizations are reporting they had to use facial recognition programs to identify the 38-year-old man who, once he surrendered, would not talk. Just moments ago, the president spoke about the shooting.
Before going any further, I'd like to address the horrific shooting that took place yesterday at Capital Gazette newsroom in Annapolis, Maryland. This attack shocked the conscience of our nation and filled our hearts with grief. Journalists, like all Americans, should be free from the fear of being violently attacked while doing their job. To the families of the victims, there are no words to express our sorrow for your loss. Horrible, horrible event, horrible thing happened. When you're suffering, we pledge our eternal support. This suffering is so great. I've seen some of the people, so great. My government will not rest until we have done everything in our power to reduce violent crime and to protect innocent life. We will not ever leave your side, so our warmest, best wishes and regrets. Horrific, horrible thing.
To me, I clearly believe him. I am with the president and utter everything he said there. You know, the left goes crazy when we offer thoughts and prayers for victims of these horrific crimes, but we mean it when we say it. We don't want this to happen to anybody, and we mean it when we say we offer our prayers for those dealing with unfathomable grief. And I will take the criticism from anybody out there who wants to criticize me for offering that up on behalf of NRATV, the NRA, all of us here, all humans and Americans who feel for these people that should never have to go through all of this. What I did not do yesterday, as what so many on the left did, was play politics with a horrific killing spree before they even knew what had happened. You had people calling on Congress to enact more gun control laws, unaware that there was a shotgun used and no new law would have stopped this killer from killing. And then, of course, and I'm going to say this from both sides, you had people blaming Maxine Waters and her violent rhetoric for this before even knowing what happened. This isn't even wildly connected to Maxine Waters' outrageous and very dangerous comments, by the way, but this is not connected to that, just as this is not connected to President Trump and his comments about calling the media an enemy of the state, a media that lies and is often deceitful. But people couldn't wait to jump on that bandwagon. Immediately following the shooting, immediately, the president was the one that they started to blame, not the shooter. No, not the man who plotted and carried out this sick plan. They blamed the president of the United States. Just listening to the shouting on the White House lawn yesterday as the president returned from a trip to Wisconsin.
Annapolis. Any words about the dead in Annapolis, Mr. President? Can you talk about the active shooters in Annapolis? Could you please talk to us about the dead reporters in Annapolis?
Mr. President, will you keep talking
Do you have any words of condolence for the families, Mr. President?
Why are you walking away?
Why won't you come and talk to us about that?
They sound despicable, really. It's embarrassing to hear them yelling and screaming over the heavy noise of those helicopter blades turning as he walks from Marine One there. The president rarely stops and talks to those reporters. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. They try to make him out to look bad. That's all that was about. And they wanted to grandstand, having their voices heard so they could go home and tell their wives and husbands to turn on the TV, listen to me yelling at the president. Brittany Hughes is from the Media Research Center, newsbusters.org, a great organization. We love to have folks from there come on the program. Brittany, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So, Brittany, yelling at the president is nothing new. I used to watch Sam Donaldson do this to Ronald Reagan. But yesterday seemed almost out of line with what they were yelling, how they were yelling it, and just the tone of their voices.
Yeah, so I mean, as you can hear, definitely there was a lot of helicopter noise, and to get your voice heard, you do have to raise your voice. But I think it was the content of what they were yelling. These were not questions from reporters that really wanted a substantive answer. This is a media that hates this president, had already made up their minds, and you could see from tweets that they were firing out yesterday before any details had even come out about this shooting, before we knew who it was, how many there were. We didn't even know that the police had actually contained the situation, and before any details actually came out, the media and a bunch of pundits were already blaming him for, rhetoric against the media and for inciting violence against the media. And I think what you see here is an extension of that same media just hurling accusations in the form of questions at a president that they had already made up their mind was at fault for this. I'm barely old enough to remember a time when journalism actually involved waiting for facts and then reporting facts. But that's not what we deal with today. We deal with a media that has already decided to blame a president for anything bad that happens. And it's interesting to see how quickly the story has kind of gone out of headlines when they found out they couldn't blame President Trump and they couldn't blame AR-15s, which are their two favorite things to blame for everything.
Yeah. And both didn't fit their story, which is why I believe you will see this story fade from the headlines because simply an AR-15 wasn't used and no new law would have stopped this, so they will move on from all of it. There's a rush to be first, but yesterday wasn't a rush to be first about things. It was a rush to act like an activist journalist to slam President Trump. Now, I understand that journalists are on edge these days just with the heightened sense of fear that is out there, just as Trump supporters are on edge when you hear the likes of Maxine Waters saying they should be surrounded and force them out of restaurants and they're at the gas station, harass them. Everybody is concerned. Nobody wants people killed, though. And I would even say to Maxine Waters, I don't think she wants people killed. I really don't. I do think she is legitimate when she says she wants people harassed. My fear is that leads to violence and could be death. But these journalists were quick. They know the heat was on the left, and so this was their chance to turn everything around and put it back at the feet of Donald Trump.
I think you're exactly right. And look, I think that what this really calls for is for everybody on both sides of the aisle to kind of tone down the rhetoric a little bit. It's fine to call out the media when they report fake news. We've been doing that for several weeks when it comes to immigration. They have lied. That is a disservice to the American people. But I also think that on the other side of the fence, there have been calls to harass Trump administration officials, to harass Republicans every time they step out their door. The rhetoric is definitely heated up. And look, threats of violence, unfortunately, against members of the media, as much as they would like you to think that it's something brand new in the age of Trump or whatever, that's not true. One of my first jobs after college was at a small town newspaper in Southern Virginia, and I will tell you, we didn't get threats of this magnitude, but we definitely had a lot of people who absolutely hated us and who would sue us all the time and have frivolous lawsuits brought against us. And that's something that existed even back then in 2013. But I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing heightened rhetoric on both sides. The sick part that I think we saw yesterday was a media that was almost salivating over the possibility that this could possibly be tied to Trump. It wasn't so much, oh, this is a tragedy, this is horrible, let's mourn these victims, let's figure out what happened and how we can prevent it. It was an immediate rush to judgment, an immediate rush to attempting to link him and things that he has said to this tragedy, almost as though they wanted it to be the case. I'm not saying they wanted the shooting, but since that had already happened, it was though that they wanted that to be the case so that they could use it as ammunition again against the president. And I think that when mass shootings are no longer tragedies to be mourned and things to be learned from so that we can grow and we can prevent them, but rather things to be hurled at the other side, I think we have a serious problem that we need to take a look at in this country in terms of how we speak about one another, how we speak to one another, and how we disagree.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you use the term salivating over this, that's exactly what they were doing. They wanted this to be Donald Trump's problem. And I will say, and I'm very proud of everybody here at NRATV, when this happened, you did not see anybody here. I know there were people blaming Maxine Waters, other conservatives, and what I would say is that was just as bad as any liberal blaming Donald Trump. But from all of us here, what we waited for was the facts. We were certainly not hoping it was tied to anything. All I wanted to know was details so I could then come up with some kind of a solution to prevent it from happening again. That's all I was looking for.
Well, and that's something that the NRA actually does very well, is to wait for a lot of the facts and to make sure that they have the information. And it's a reason why the NRA does have so many supporters. You don't see people typically, especially those who are members of the NRA, coming out of the woodwork and immediately issuing opinions on things before they have all of the facts. What you do see is a whole lot of people rushing to condemn the NRA. As a matter of fact, and don't ask me to pronounce his name because I definitely can't, but there was a verified gentleman on Twitter who immediately came out and said, the sick part is that the NRA is going to profit from this, and so are all the gun manufacturers. So, before the facts had even come out, before we knew why this man had done this, before we realized that he was, clearly a mentally ill, unhinged man who had stalked women and had a slew of problems on his record, before any of that had come out, you already had people on the left condemning 5 million plus NRA members from profiting off of a murder that, again, like we have seen in the past, they had absolutely nothing to do with. And I think, the left is really doing themselves a disservice when they do this, because it only emboldens people who are members of the NRA to really stand up for what they know is right and to stand up for their Second Amendment rights rather than kowtow to all this hateful rhetoric.
Yeah. Brittany Hughes, great job. I appreciate you helping us break all of this down. Thank you. And we're going to definitely get you on the program as well. Maybe we don't want to bump Dan Gaynor out of his seat, but you did a pretty good job. You tell Dan.
Oh, that's fine. That's totally fine. Just go ahead. That's fine. I'm much younger. It's fine.
That's great. Hey, well, tell the whole gang we said hi. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. She talked about this rhetoric just real quickly. You had Nancy Pelosi yesterday, a tweet from her coming out basically slamming the NRA and more gun control. You have Dick Durbin coming out and slamming the NRA as well. Two leaders. There's Nancy Pelosi. Congress has a responsibility to take action to prevent the tragedy of gun violence. Every day it fails to do so is a stain on our country. She was calling for gun control before any motive had even been known. Dick Durbin's tweet. Take a look at this one. Congress should have the courage to buck the NRA and act on gun safety bills to stop the next shooting. Brings the NRA into all of this. When the NRA is here on the forefront of trying to help people protect their buildings, their loved ones, their friends, their coworkers, and that is what we will continue to do unwaveringly. As we have said, there are things we can all do to prevent ourselves from becoming a victim. In Maryland, that was clear. We could roll here. Stick with me there, guys. Stick with me. Thank you. In Maryland, it was very hard to get a concealed carry permit. You have to prove a need to the Secretary of the State Police. Need should never be a requirement to exercise a constitutional right. It is true in every state, far too many offices do not allow licensed concealed carry permit holders to carry out work. That's a mistake. Even Hollywood star Dean Cain alluded to this on Fox and Friends this morning.
I wish somebody had been inside the building with their concealed carry, and I wish that the place had been a little bit more hardened.
Yeah.
It is nice that there is a voice of reason coming out of Hollywood. Thank you, Dean Cain. All right, folks, I want to leave you now with what Wayne LaPierre had to say about all of this. It wasn't about this shooting, but it is important to talk about what we can do to prevent these things and what causes many of these things. And so when we talk about this, we can go back to many of Wayne's speech, which almost predict many of the things that have happened in this country. He's predicted the rise of socialism. He's predicted the rise of the violent left. And clearly, he has said and warned over and over again that we must be hardening not just our schools, but everything when it comes to security. This is Wayne LaPierre.
Last decade, the Obama decade, many of those leaders have been forced out as a tidal wave of new European-style socialists seize control of the Democratic Party. Obama promised a fundamental transformation of our country. And you know what? It began with his own national party, a party that is now infested with saboteurs who don't believe in capitalism, don't believe in the Constitution, don't believe in our freedom, and don't believe in America as we know it. Obama may be gone, but their utopian dream, it marches on. And President Trump's election, while crucial, can't turn away the wave of these new European-style socialists bearing down upon us.
You're watching NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.